The Miami skyline glittered like a cascade of jewels against the velvet night, its reflection shimmering on the dark waters of Biscayne Bay. A sleek white yacht cut through the gentle waves, its decks alive with the hum of laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft pulse of jazz drifting from hidden speakers. The vessel Elysium belonged to the Blake family, a dynasty synonymous with luxury hotels and unrelenting ambition. Tonight, it hosted an exclusive gala, a glittering affair attended by Miami's elite, where deals were struck and alliances forged under the guise of celebration. Nathan Blake, a white American man with sharp blue eyes and a jawline that could cut glass, stood at the yacht's railing with a glass of bourbon. At 29, he was the heir to the Blake empire, a weight that pressed against his broad shoulders like an invisible yoke. His pale skin caught the glow of the deck lights, accentuating the tailored lines of his black tuxedo. Nathan's fair complexion, inherited from generations of New England stock, stood out among the tanned socialites, marking him as an outsider and royalty in this sun-soaked city. He was undeniably handsome, with sandy blonde hair swept back and a presence that commanded attention, though his eyes betrayed a restlessness that no wealth could soothe. The expectations of his family were a constant shadow. His father, long deceased, had built the Blake hotel chain from a single property into a global empire, and his mother, Evelyn, now ruled with an iron grip, her every word a decree. Nathan was her golden boy, groomed to inherit, yet the pressure to prove himself gnawed at him. Tonight's gala was another test, a chance to charm investors and secure a new property deal in South Beach. But as he scanned the crowd, his mind wandered, seeking escape from the suffocating weight of duty. Across the deck, Sophie Tran caught his eye, an African-American woman of 26. She stood out not for her attire, a simple, elegant navy dress that hugged her slender frame, but for the quiet strength in her posture. Her dark skin glowed warmly under the yacht's soft lighting, starkly contrasting the ostentatious glamour around her. Sophie's tightly coiled hair was pulled into an intricate updo, accentuating the graceful curve of her neck. As a nurse, she was here only by chance, invited as a +1 by a colleague who worked for a hospital funded by the Blake Foundation. Her presence was an anomaly in this world of privilege, yet she carried herself with a confidence that intrigued Nathan. Sophie sipped her sparkling water, her brown eyes scanning the crowd with curiosity and caution. She was used to navigating spaces where she didn't quite belong, her life a series of calculated steps to rise above her modest roots. Raised in a working-class neighborhood in Atlanta, she had clawed her way through nursing school, driven by a fierce determination to make a difference. Her dark complexion, a source of pride, had also been a battleground in a world quick to judge, but Sophie had learned to wield her resilience like armor. Tonight, she was here to observe, not to impress, but the weight of Nathan's gaze pulled her from her thoughts. Their eyes met across the crowded deck, a fleeting connection that felt like a spark in the humid night air. Nathan, drawn by an instinct he couldn't name, excused himself from a conversation with a real estate mogul and made his way toward her. The jazz band shifted to a slower tempo, the saxophone's mournful notes weaving through the chatter. "Can I join you?" Nathan asked, his voice low and smooth, tinged with a New England accent that softened at the edges. Sophie tilted her head, assessing him. "Depends," she said, her tone playful but guarded. "Are you here to sell me something? Or are you just looking for someone to share the view?" He chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "The view's better from where you're standing." She raised an eyebrow, but a smile tugged at her lips. "Smooth, but I'm not sure I buy it." They fell into conversation, which felt effortless, yet charged with unspoken possibility. Her wit struck Nathan. How she matched his banter without flinching, her words laced with a quiet strength that made the rest of the gala disappear. Sophie, in turn, found herself disarmed by his sincerity, a rare quality in a man who looked like he owned the world. He spoke of his love for sailing, a passion his family dismissed as frivolous, and she shared stories of late-night shifts in the ER, where every decision was a matter of life and death. As the night deepened, the yacht drifted farther from shore, the city lights a distant constellation. They moved to a quieter corner of the deck, the air thick with salt and possibility. Nathan's pale hand brushed against Sophie's darker one as he gestured toward the stars, and neither pulled away. The touch was electric, a silent question hanging between them. "Do you ever feel like you're running out of time to figure it all out?" Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophie nodded her eyes, tracing the horizon every day. "But sometimes you must leap and trust it'll work out." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. When their eyes met again, the world seemed to pause. Nathan leaned in, and Sophie didn't pull back. Their kiss was slow, tentative at first, then deepening with a hunger that surprised them both. The night blurred into a haze of whispered confessions, stolen touches, and the reckless abandon that only comes when two souls collide under the stars. They slipped below deck, finding solace in a private cabin where the world couldn't intrude. The following hours were a dance of passion and vulnerability, their differences in skin and status dissolving in the dark. Nathan's fair skin pressed against Sophie's rich brown, their bodies a canvas of contrast and connection. For one night, they were free from the weight of his legacy and the barriers she'd spent a lifetime overcoming. The yacht returned to port as dawn broke and reality crept back in. Sophie slipped out of the cabin, her heart racing with exhilaration and fear. Nathan woke to find her gone. Her absence was a pang he couldn't explain. He clutched the memory of her warmth, laughter, and strength, unaware that their night would ripple through their lives in ways neither could foresee. The days that followed were a blur for Nathan. The gala had secured the South Beach deal, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment with Sophie. He didn't know her last name, only that she was a nurse, which made her both a mystery and a beacon in his carefully curated world. He considered tracking her down, but hesitated, unsure if she'd want to be found. Blake's name came with strings, and he wasn't sure he could offer her anything without pulling her into his family's orbit. Sophie, meanwhile, returned to her life in Miami, where her shifts at the hospital were a grounding force. But the memory of Nathan lingered, his blue eyes haunting her quieter moments. She tried to dismiss it as a fleeting indulgence, a night that belonged to the sea and the stars, not to her reality. Yet as weeks passed, a new truth emerged. She was pregnant. The realization hit like a tidal wave, equal parts joy and terror. She was 26, still building her career, and the father was a man she barely knew, a white billionaire whose world was as distant from hers as the moon. Fear took root. Sophie had seen how power worked and crushed those who didn't fit its mold. Blake's name was synonymous with influence. She couldn't imagine raising a child in its shadow. She thought of reaching out to Nathan, but stopped herself. What if he rejected her? What if his family saw her as a threat, a black woman from a working-class background, claiming a piece of their empire? The risks felt too great. She made a choice. Packing a single suitcase, Sophie left Miami for Orlando, where a friend offered her a place to stay and a job at a hospital. She didn't leave a forwarding address or tell her colleagues where she was going. The night on the yacht became a secret she buried deep, a spark of light she'd carry alone until the day it would demand to be seen. The hum of Miami's nightlife had faded for Sophie Tran, replaced by the steady rhythm of hospital monitors and the faint squeak of her sneakers on polished floors. In Orlando, she'd carved out a new life that revolved around survival and secrecy. Her days were consumed by long shifts at the hospital, where she moved with quiet efficiency, tending to patients with a gentleness that belied the storm inside her. At night, She collapsed into a small apartment, the walls bare except for a single photo of her parents. Their smiles, a reminder of the strength she drew from her roots. But the weight of her secret grew heavier each week. She was carrying Nathan Blake's child. In Miami, Nathan stood at the helm of the Blake empire, his life a whirlwind of board meetings and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The South Beach property deal had solidified his reputation as a worthy heir, but success felt hollow. The memory of Sophie, her sharp-wit warmth, the way she'd challenged him without fear, lingered like a ghost. He'd tried to find her asking discreet questions through hospital contacts, but she'd vanished without a trace. The absence gnawed at him, a puzzle he couldn't solve, and he buried himself in work to dull the ache. Nathan's sister-in-law, Vanessa Blake, watched his distraction with a predator's eye. Married to Nathan's older brother, Edward, she was a fixture in the Blake family, her polished smile masking a ruthless ambition. Vanessa had spent years cultivating her influence, positioning herself as indispensable to Evelyn, the family matriarch. Nathan's rising star threatened her carefully constructed power, and she wasn't about to let a fleeting romance derail her plans. When whispers of his inquiries about a nurse reached her, Vanessa saw an opportunity. She began her campaign, subtly planting seeds of doubt during a family dinner at the Blake estate. The dining room, with its crystal chandelier and mahogany table, was a stage for her performance. "Nathan, you've been distracted lately," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "I heard you've been asking about some woman from the gala, a nurse." Nathan's fork paused midair, his jaw tightening. "It's nothing," he said, his tone clipped. "Just tying up loose ends." Vanessa's lips curved a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, darling, you're too trusting. People like that, they see someone like you and think, opportunity. I heard she's been asking around about you too. Sounds like she's after something." Engrossed in his wine, Edward barely looked up, but Evelyn's sharp gaze pinned Nathan. "You'd do well to focus on the family, Nathan," she said. "We can't afford distractions." The seed was planted, and Vanessa nurtured it with care. Over the next few weeks, she fed Nathan carefully crafted lies. Sophie had been seen slipping a watch from a guest's coat at the gala. She'd been fired from the hospital for unethical behavior. She'd bragged about her connection to the Blakes. Each story was a thread in a web designed to trap Nathan's trust. He resisted at first, the memory of Sophie's sincerity clashing with the accusations, but doubt crept in, fueled by his own insecurities. Had he been naive? Had she played him, seeing only his wealth and name? In Orlando, Sophie's world was shrinking to the size of her growing belly. She'd confided in no one, not even her closest friend Maya, who'd helped her settle in. The hospital job was grueling, but it paid the bills, and she'd enrolled in night classes to qualify for a lead nurse position. Every decision was for the child. She carried a child she already loved fiercely. She imagined telling Nathan, and pictured his blue eyes softening at the news, but the fantasy always crumbled. The Blakes were a fortress of wealth and power. She was a nobody in their eyes. She couldn't risk her child being caught in their world, or worse, taken from her. One evening, as Sophie sat in her apartment, a wave of nausea hit, followed by a sharp cramp. Panic surged, and she rushed to the hospital, where a kind doctor confirmed the baby was fine, but urged her to rest. The scare crystallized her resolve. She would protect this child at all costs. That meant staying hidden, staying silent. She stopped checking her old email, deleted her social media, and cut ties with anyone who might lead the Blakes to her. The night on the yacht felt like a dream, now one she couldn't afford to chase. Nathan, meanwhile, was unraveling under Vanessa's manipulation. She'd produced a forged document, a hospital report, alleging Sophie had stolen medical supplies, presented with just enough detail to seem credible. Nathan's trust in Sophie cracked, then shattered. He told himself he'd been a fool, that she'd used him, that the connection he'd felt was a lie. Yet even as he embraced the betrayal, a part of him ached for the truth. He threw himself into work signing deals and opening new hotels, but the emptiness grew. Vanessa watched with satisfaction, her position secure for now. But she underestimated Nathan's tenacity and the pull of a bond forged in a single, unforgettable night. Sophie, too, underestimated the weight of her secret, unaware that it was only a matter of time before the truth would surface, pulling her and Nathan back into each other's orbits. As months passed, Sophie prepared for motherhood alone, her heart a battleground of hope and fear. Hardened by deception, Nathan moved forward, but the ghost of Sophie remained a question mark in a life he thought he'd mastered. The stage was set for a collision that would unravel lies, expose truths, and test the strength of a bond neither could fully escape. The fluorescent lights of Orlando's Mercy General Hospital buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the bustling emergency room. Sophie Tran moved through the chaos with practiced calm, her hands steady as she adjusted an IV drip for a patient. Despite the 12-hour shift, her navy scrubs were crisp, and her coiled hair was tucked neatly into a bun. The hospital was her sanctuary, where she could lose herself in the rhythm of saving lives, where the weight of her past decisions felt momentarily lighter. But even here, the shadow of Nathan Blake lingered, a memory she couldn't entirely shake. 5 years had passed since the night on the yacht, and Sophie's life had reshaped itself around her son Liam. At 4 years old, he was a whirlwind of energy with bright eyes and a laugh that could melt the hardest heart. Raising him alone in a modest Orlando apartment was a grind: night shifts, daycare costs, and the constant juggle of bills. But Sophie refused to let it break her. She enrolled in night classes to become a lead nurse, studying during stolen moments between patients and parenting. Her dreams were no longer just for herself. They were for Liam, for the life she wanted to give him. Her apartment was a small, tidy space in a working-class neighborhood. The walls held crayon drawings and a single-framed photo of her parents, their smiles a reminder of the resilience she'd inherited. Liam's toys were scattered across the living room, a testament to his boundless curiosity. Every night after tucking him into bed, Sophie would sit at the kitchen table, textbooks open, her mind racing with medical terminology and the ever-present fear of losing the fragile balance she'd built. But Liam's presence grounded her. His questions about the world, his tiny hand in hers, were enough to keep her going. Yet the memory of Nathan haunted her quieter moments. She'd see his face in a stranger's glance, or hear his voice in the cadence of a song on the radio. She wondered what he was doing, whether he'd forgotten her, or believed the lies that had driven her away. The decision to leave Miami had been hers, but it wasn't easy. She'd chosen to protect Liam from the Blake family's world, a world she feared would swallow them both. Still, a part of her ached for what might have been, for the man who'd seen her, truly seen her, for one fleeting night. In Miami, Nathan Blake was a man on fire, though few could see the flames. The Blake hotel empire had grown under his leadership, with new properties dotting the globe from Dubai to London. He moved through boardrooms with a quiet intensity, his tailored suits and sharp commands masking the restlessness within. Success came easily now, but it was a hollow victory. The gala yacht and Sophie were ghosts he couldn't exorcise. Years ago he'd tried to find her, but Vanessa's lies had poisoned his resolve, convincing him that Sophie had been a mistake, a manipulation. Yet the doubt lingered, a splinter in his mind. Nathan's days were a blur of meetings, site visits, and late-night emails. The Blake estate, a sprawling mansion overlooking the ocean, was home and prison. His mother, Evelyn, ruled it like a queen, with her expectations constantly being pressured. His brother, Edward, was a passive figure, content to let Vanessa pull the strings. Vanessa herself was ever present, her smile a blade hidden in silk. She'd secured her place as Evelyn's confidant, whispering strategies and steering the family's legacy. Nathan's growing influence threatened her, and she watched him closely, ready to strike at any sign of weakness. Work was Nathan's refuge, but it couldn't fill the void. He avoided relationships wary of being used, and his trust was eroded by Vanessa's lies about Sophie. Nights were the hardest when the city's hum faded. He was left with thoughts. He'd stand on the balcony of his penthouse, the ocean stretching before him, and wonder where Sophie had gone. Had she moved on? Had she ever felt what he had? The questions gnawed at him, unanswered. Back in Orlando, Sophie's life was a delicate balance. Her shifts at the hospital were grueling, but she excelled, earning the respect of her colleagues. She'd become a fixture in the ER, known for her quick thinking and compassion. Off-duty, she was Liam's everything, his teacher, protector, and cheerleader. They'd spend weekends at the park, Liam chasing butterflies, while Sophie watched her heart swelling with love and fear. She knew the Blake name carried weight, and the thought of them discovering Liam terrified her. She'd built a fortress around her son, but it felt fragile against the unknown. One evening, after a particularly brutal shift, Sophie sat with Maya, her closest friend in Orlando. They were at a diner with sticky tables and bottomless coffee. Maya, a fellow nurse, was the only one Sophie had trusted with pieces of her story. Not the whole truth, but enough to know she'd run from something big. "Have you ever thought about going back?" Maya asked, stirring her coffee. "To Miami, I mean. To face whatever it was." Sophie shook her head, her eyes distant. "There's nothing there for me, just complications." Maya didn't push, but her gaze was knowing. "You can't run forever, Soph. Whatever it is, it's part of you." The words stung, but Sophie brushed them off. She couldn't afford to look back, not when Liam's future depended on her strength. Yet, as she drove home that night, the diner's neon lights fading in her rear view, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was closer than she thought. Nathan, too, felt the pull of something unresolved. At a hotel opening in Miami, he stood before a crowd of investors, his speech polished but mechanical. As applause filled the room, his eyes scanned the faces, searching for one he knew he wouldn't find. Vanessa was there, her presence a reminder of the lies that had shaped his choices. He'd begun to question her slight inconsistencies in her stories, catching his attention. But without proof, he was trapped, bound by family loyalty and the empire he was destined to lead. Sophie and Nathan, separated by miles and years, were tethered by a bond neither fully understood. In Orlando, Sophie tucked Liam into bed, whispering stories of courage and hope. In Miami, Nathan stared at the stars, wondering if he'd ever find the piece of himself he'd lost. Their worlds were apart, but fate conspired to pull them back together. The emergency room at Mercy General was a storm of controlled chaos, the air thick with the sharp scent of antiseptic and the urgency of beeping monitors. Sophie Tran navigated the fray with a calm that belied her racing heart, her hands moving with precision as she prepped a trauma bay. A car accident victim was en route, and the team was braced for action. She adjusted her stethoscope, pulled her coiled hair tightly back, and pushed thoughts of Liam safe at daycare to the back of her mind. Focus was her lifeline, her way of keeping the world at bay. Miles away in Miami, Nathan Blake gripped the steering wheel of his sleek black sedan, the city's neon lights blurring past. He was late for a meeting, his mind tangled in a new hotel acquisition. The road was slick from an earlier rain, and as he rounded a curve, a truck veered into his lane. Time slowed, the screech of tires deafening. He swerved, but the impact came hard, metal crunching against metal. Pain flared in his shoulder, but he stayed conscious, the world spinning as his car skidded to a stop. Paramedics arrived, their voices a distant hum, and soon he was strapped to a gurney, headed to the nearest hospital, Mercy General in Orlando. In the ER, Sophie was briefed on the incoming patient, male, mid-30s, minor injuries, possible concussion. She didn't think twice. Her focus was on the task. She was ready when the stretcher rolled in, directing the team with quiet authority. But as she leaned over to check the patient's vitals, her breath caught. Nathan Blake lay before her, his face bruised but unmistakable, his blue eyes clouded with pain but still piercing. For a moment, the world tilted, the noise of the ER fading to a dull roar. Nathan blinked, his vision clearing, and saw her. Sophie. The woman he'd spent years trying to forget, now inches away, her hands steady as she checked his pulse. Her presence hit him like a wave, memories of that night on the yacht flooding back. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry and the words stuck. "Sophie," he managed, his voice hoarse. She froze, her hands trembling for a second, before she regained control. "Mr. Blake, I'm your nurse. Stay still, please." Her tone was professional, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions, shock, fear, and something deeper she couldn't name. The next hour was a blur of medical protocol. Sophie worked with mechanical precision, ordering scans, checking for fractures, and ensuring Nathan was stable. He had a dislocated shoulder and minor cuts. Nothing life-threatening, but the sight of him unraveled her carefully built defenses. She avoided his gaze, focusing on charts and monitors, but she felt his eyes on her, searching, questioning. When the doctor cleared him for discharge with a sling and pain meds, Sophie handed off his chart to another nurse and slipped away, her heart pounding. Nathan, still reeling, refused to let her vanish again. He cornered her in a quiet hallway, his sling awkward, but his determination fierce. "Sophie, wait. We need to talk." She turned, her arms crossed, her expression guarded. "There's nothing to say, Nathan. You're my patient. That's it. That's not it, and you know it." His voice was low, urgent. 5 years, Sophie. You disappeared. Why?" Her jaw tightened, memories of Vanessa's lies and her own fears rushing back. "I had my reasons. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," he said, stepping closer. "I've spent years wondering what happened, what I did wrong." The sincerity in his voice cracked something in her, but she held firm. Liam's face flashed in her mind. His safety, her priority. "It's in the past," she said, turning away. "Go back to your life, Nathan." He didn't follow, but his presence lingered, a spark reigniting feelings she'd buried. Over the next few days, Nathan delayed his return to Miami, citing follow-up appointments. In truth, he was piecing Sophie's life together in Orlando. He learned she was a single mother, which hit him like a punch. Was the child hers alone? Or could it be? He pushed the thought aside, unwilling to hope, but the question gnawed at him. Sophie, meanwhile, was unraveling. Seeing Nathan had reopened wounds she thought had healed. She kept Liam close, dropping him off and picking him up from daycare herself, her instincts screaming to protect him. But Nathan was persistent, showing up at the hospital with questions about his recovery, his eyes always searching hers. One evening, as she left a late shift, he was waiting by her car, his expression softer, but no less determined. "Sophie, I'm not leaving until you tell me why you ran," he said. "I deserve that much." She wanted to snap, to push him away, but the weight of 5 years of silence was too much. "You believed lies about me," she said, her voice shaking. "You think I'd stick around for that?" His brow furrowed. "Lies? What are you talking about?" She shook her head, unwilling to dive into the past. "It doesn't matter. I have a life here, Nathan, a good one. Please don't ruin it." Before he could respond, she got into her car and drove away, her heart racing. But Nathan wasn't done. He hired a private investigator discreetly to learn more about Sophie's life. The report came quickly. A son, Liam, is 4 years old, and no father is listed. Nathan's mind spun, the math adding up in a way that made his chest ache. He needed to see her again to know the truth. Their subsequent encounter was at the hospital cafeteria, where Sophie grabbed coffee during a break. Nathan sat across from her, uninvited but undeterred. "I know about Liam," he said quietly. "Is he—" Sophie's cup froze halfway to her lips. She set it down, her hands trembling. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't go there, Nathan." But he did. He kept returning his questions, gentle but relentless, until Sophie's walls began to crack. The truth was, a tide she couldn't hold back forever, and Nathan's presence was a storm pulling it to the surface. Their reunion was no longer just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a reckoning that would force them to face the past and the secrets that still bound them. The hospital cafeteria at Mercy General was a haven of muted chaos. The clatter of trays and hum of conversation, a backdrop to Sophie Tran's racing thoughts. She sat alone at a corner table, her coffee untouched, the weight of Nathan Blake's words pressing against her chest. "I know about Liam," he'd said, his voice steady, but laced with a question that threatened to unravel her carefully guarded world. Sophie's fingers tightened around her cup, her coiled hair slipping loose from its bun, a rare sign of her fraying control. She'd spent 5 years protecting her son, building a life free from the Blake family's shadow. Now Nathan was here in her hospital and city, and the truth she'd buried was clawing its way to the surface. Nathan sat across from her, his sling still in place from the car accident, his blue eyes searching hers. He'd been relentless since their reunion, showing up at the hospital under the guise of follow-up visits, each encounter chipping away at her defenses. Today he'd caught her off guard, his presence a quiet storm in the cafeteria's fluorescent glow. "Sophie," he said, his voice low, "I need to know. Is Liam mine?" The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. Sophie's breath caught her mind racing through 1,000 scenarios, denial, deflection, escape. But Nathan's gaze held her, not with anger, but with a raw vulnerability mirrored her own. She saw the photo on her phone, the one she'd left open by mistake, Liam with his bright eyes and curly hair, a mirror of Nathan's features in miniature. She'd known this moment was coming, had dreaded it since the day she left Miami. "Don't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do," Nathan said, leaning forward. "I've been going over it in my head, Sophie. The timing, the way you left. I need the truth." Her eyes flicked to the cafeteria's exit, instinct urging her to run, but there was no outrunning this. She'd built a fortress around Liam, but Nathan was inside the walls now, and denial would only delay the inevitable. She took a shaky breath, her hands folding tightly in her lap. "Yes," she said, the word barely audible. "Liam is your son." The admission landed like a thunderclap. Nathan's face went still, his eyes widening as the weight of her words sank in. He leaned back, his good hand gripping the table's edge, as if anchoring himself against the flood of emotions. Shock, pain, and a fierce longing battled in his expression. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice raw. 5 years, Sophie. 5 years, and I had no idea I had a son." Sophie's throat tightened, tears prickling her eyes. "I didn't have a choice," she said. "You don't know what it was like. Your family, Vanessa. She made it clear I didn't belong in your world. She called me a thief, a liar, said I'd used you. I was scared, Nathan. Frightened they'd take him from me, scared of what your family could do." Nathan's jaw clenched, Vanessa's name a spark igniting his anger. "Vanessa," he muttered, the pieces falling into place. The lies, forged documents, and whispers that had poisoned his trust in Sophie led back to his sister-in-law. But the betrayal was overshadowed by the revelation of Liam. "He's my son," Nathan said, more to himself than to her. "I have a son." Sophie watched him, her heart aching. She'd expected anger, accusations, but Nathan's voice held a quiet awe, a hunger to know the child he'd never met. He's fantastic," she said, her voice softening. "Smart, curious, always asking questions. He loves stories and running in the park, but I've kept him safe, Nathan, away from all of this. Nathan's eyes met hers, a storm of emotions swirling within. I want to meet him, he said. I want to be his father. The words hit Sophie like a wave, stirring a mix of hope and fear. She wanted Liam to have a father, to know the love she'd seen in Nathan's eyes that night on the yacht. But the Blake family was a labyrinth of power and secrets, and she couldn't trust that it wouldn't swallow her son whole. It's not that simple, she said. You don't just get to walk in and claim him. I've been his everything. I won't let anyone hurt him. I'd never hurt him. Nathan said, his voice fierce. Or you. But I deserve a chance, Sophie. He deserves a father. The cafeteria seemed to shrink around them, the noise fading as they faced the chasm of 5 lost years. Sophie stood her chair, scraping against the floor. I need time, she said. It's too much. She walked away, her heart pounding, leaving Nathan staring after her, his mind reeling with the truth of Liam. Over the next few days, Nathan was a man divided. Part of him wanted to storm into Sophie's life, see his son, and make up for lost time. But another part, the part that remembered Sophie's fear, held him back. He returned to Miami, his shoulder healing, but his heart heavy. He dug into Vanessa's lies, hiring a discreet investigator to trace the forged hospital report that had branded Sophie a thief. The evidence was mounting, but so was his need to protect Sophie and Liam from his family's machinations. Sophie, meanwhile, wrestled with her own turmoil. She watched Liam play at daycare, his laughter a balm for her frayed nerves. Telling Nathan the truth had been a release, but opened a door she'd kept locked. She imagined Liam meeting his father and pictured Nathan's smile as he tossed a ball or read a bedtime story. But the fear lingered. Fear of losing Liam. Fear of the Blakes' power. Fear that Nathan's world would change her son in ways she couldn't control. One evening, as Sophie tucked Liam into bed, he looked up at her, his eyes wide. Do I have a daddy? He asked, his voice small but curious. Sophie's heart stopped. She'd prepared for this question, but not with Nathan so close now. You have me, she said, kissing his forehead. And I love you more than anything. It was enough for Liam for now, but Sophie knew the truth was a tide she couldn't hold back forever. In Miami, Nathan stood on his penthouse balcony, the ocean stretching. The thought of Liam, a son he'd never known, filled him with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. He would find a way to be part of his life to earn Sophie's trust. But first, he had to face the lies that had kept them apart, and the woman who'd spun them. The Miami skyline glittered like a promise, but it reminded Nathan Blake of the battle ahead. He stood in his office at the Blake Hotel headquarters, a sleek glass tower overlooking the ocean. Papers littered his desk, evidence of Vanessa's deceit compiled by his investigator. Forged documents, intercepted emails, and a trail of lies that had driven Sophie away. His shoulder, still tender from the accident, ached as he paced, but the pain was nothing compared to the fire in his chest. Liam was his son, and Vanessa's manipulations had stolen 5 years from him. Yet doubt gnawed at him. Had Sophie hidden Liam to protect him? Or was there more to her silence? In Orlando, Sophie, Tran moved through her hospital shift with a heaviness she couldn't shake. Since admitting the truth about Liam, she felt exposed, as if the walls she'd built were crumbling. She checked her phone obsessively, half expecting a message from Nathan, half dreading it. Liam was at daycare, safe for now, but the thought of Nathan claiming a role in his life terrified her. She'd seen the Blake family's power, the way it bent people to its will. What if Nathan's intentions weren't as pure as he claimed? What if he saw Liam as a pawn, a way to secure his legacy? Nathan's persistence didn't help. He'd sent a text, simple but direct. I want to meet him, Sophie. Please. She hadn't responded, her heart torn between the man she'd once felt so connected to and the mother she'd become. Her shifts at Mercy General were a lifeline grounding her in routine, but even there she felt Nathan's presence, as if his determination could cross the miles between them. The misunderstanding took root in Nathan's mind, fed by years of Vanessa's poison and insecurities. He sat in his office, replaying Sophie's words. I had no choice. But why hadn't she fought for him for them? The thought that she might have hidden Liam for her own gain, a way to leverage the Blake name later, crept in unbidden. It was a thought he hated that clashed with the memory of her sincerity on the yacht, but it lingered, fueled by his family's world of calculated moves. He drove to Orlando, unable to stay away. He found Sophie at the hospital waiting outside as her shift ended. The parking lot was quiet, the air thick with the scent of rain. Sophie, he said, stepping from his car. We need to talk about Liam. Her eyes flashed a mix of anger and fear. I told you, Nathan, it's not that simple. You can't just show up and demand to be his father. I'm not demanding, he said, his voice tight. But I have a right to know him. Why are you keeping him from me? Is this about money? Leverage. The accusation hit like a slap. Sophie's hands clenched, her body rigid. You think I'd use my son like that? She said, her voice low and fierce. I left to protect him, Nathan. From your family, from you. And now you're proving I was right. The words cut deep, and Nathan's doubt hardened into anger. You didn't give me a chance, he said. You decided for me, for us. I could have been there, Sophie. You believed I was a thief, she shot back. You let Vanessa poison you. Why should I trust you now? The argument spiraled, their voices rising in the empty lot. Sophie's pain, bottled up for years, poured out, her fear of losing Liam, her loneliness, her struggle to build a life for them. Nathan's hurt matched hers, his anger at being denied his son warring with the guilt of believing Vanessa's lies. They parted with no resolution. Sophie driving away. Nathan left staring at her taillights, his heart a battlefield. Back in Miami, Vanessa sensed the shift. She'd caught wind of Nathan's trip to Orlando, his questions about Sophie. Her carefully crafted control was slipping, and she acted swiftly. She leaked a story to a local gossip site, anonymous but damning. Sophie Tran, a nurse, was allegedly extorting Nathan Blake, threatening to expose a scandal involving an illegitimate child. The rumor spread, reaching the hospital's administration. Sophie's supervisor called her in, questioning her professionalism, and said her future at Mercy General was suddenly at risk. Sophie read the article on her phone, her hands shaking. The lies were familiar. Vanessa's fingerprints all over them. She wanted to fight to clear her name, but the threat to her career and Liam's stability was real. She banned Nathan from contacting her, texting him a single line: "Stay away from us." The message broke her heart, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Nathan, seeing the article, felt a surge of rage. He recognized Vanessa's tactics, the playbook she'd used 5 years ago. But the seed of doubt remained. Had Sophie's silence been strategic? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the real enemy. He confronted Vanessa at the Blake estate, the tension crackling in the opulent study. "You did this," he said, tossing a printout of the article on her desk. "You lied about Sophie then, and you're doing it now." Why? Vanessa's smile was icy. "You're naive, Nathan. She's a nobody trying to climb. You think she kept that kid a secret out of fear? She's playing you." "Enough," Nathan snapped. "I'm done with your games. I want the truth, Vanessa, or I'll dig until I find it." Her eyes narrowed, but she held her ground. "Be careful, Nathan. You don't know what you're stirring up." The misunderstanding between Nathan and Sophie deepened, a chasm widened by lies and fear. Sophie fortified her defenses, shielding Liam from a world she couldn't trust. unaware of the more profound truths she was hiding. Nathan, torn between doubt and determination, vowed to uncover Vanessa's secrets, truths that could shatter the Blake empire and the fragile hope of rebuilding what he and Sophie had lost. The Miami sun hung low, casting a golden haze over the Blake estate, its manicured lawns and marble columns a facade of serenity. Inside, Nathan Blake stood in the study, his hands clenched at his sides, facing Vanessa, across a mahogany desk littered with family photos and gilded pens. The air was thick with tension, the kind that precedes a storm. Nathan's investigation into Vanessa's lies had uncovered a web of deceit-forged documents, paid informants, and a calculated campaign to erase Sophie Tran from his life. The revelation of Liam's existence had sharpened his resolve, and now he confronted the woman who'd orchestrated it all. Nathan said, "You've gone too far." His voice low, but edged with steel. He slid a folder across the desk, its contents spilling out emails, bank records, and a fake hospital report branding Sophie a thief. "You lied about her, Vanessa. You drove her away. My son grew up without me because of you." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her polished nails tapping rhythmically, her smile cold. "You're so dramatic, Nathan. I protected this family. That woman was a liability sniffing around for a payout. I did what was necessary." Necessary. Nathan's voice rose, his control fraying. "You fabricated a story, smeared her name, and now you're spreading rumors to ruin her career. This isn't protection, it's sabotage." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her composure unshaken. "Careful, Nathan. You're digging into things you don't understand. The Blake empire has secrets you're not ready to face. Push me, and I'll make sure they come to light." The threat hung heavy, a glimpse of the leverage she held. Nathan knew the family's wealth wasn't spotless. Whispers of offshore accounts and shady deals had surfaced before. But Vanessa's words hinted at something more profound that could topple more than her own position. He leaned forward, his gaze unflinching. "I'm not afraid of you. I want Sophie and Liam safe, and I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen." Vanessa's smile twisted, a predator sizing up its prey. "You're playing a dangerous game, Nathan. That little nurse and her brat won't thank you when the fallout hits." He turned and left her words echoing in his mind. Nathan's next move was clear. Protect Sophie and Liam, no matter the cost. He drove to Orlando that night, the dark and endless highway before him. Sophie had banned him from contact, and her text was a wall he couldn't breach, but he couldn't leave her exposed to Vanessa's schemes. He checked into a hotel near Mercy General, plotting his next steps. His investigator had given him Sophie's address, a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, but showing up uninvited felt like a violation. Instead, he sent a message through a mutual hospital contact, asking Sophie to meet him, promising answers about Vanessa. In Orlando, Sophie moved through her shift at Mercy General with a heaviness she couldn't shake. The gossip site's article had cast a shadow over her reputation, and though her supervisor hadn't fired her, the scrutiny was suffocating. She felt eyes on her in the break room, whispers trailing her in the halls. Her focus remained on Liam now, safely at daycare, but the fear of losing her job and their stability gnawed at her. Nathan's text, relayed through a colleague, was a spark in the dark, but she wasn't ready to trust him. Vanessa's lies had already cost her too much. Still, curiosity and desperation pushed her to agree to meet. They chose a quiet diner near the hospital, its neon sign flickering in the dusk. Sophie arrived first, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, her coiled hair tucked under a cap. Nathan slid into the booth across from her, his sling gone, but his posture tense. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice soft but urgent. "You don't trust me, but you need to hear this." Sophie's eyes were guarded, her voice sharp. "You've got 5 minutes. "What do you want?" "It's Vanessa," he said, sliding a slim folder toward her. "She's behind everything. The lies about you, the article, all of it. I have proof. She's trying to destroy you to keep me in line." Sophie opened the folder, her fingers trembling as she scanned the documents. The forged hospital report and the email exchanges were all there, as well as a map of Vanessa's betrayal. Her anger flared, but so did her fear. "Why is she doing this?" she asked. "What does she want?" Control Nathan said. "She's been pulling strings in my family for years. I'm a threat to her power. You and Liam are leverage, but I won't let her hurt you. I'm taking you both somewhere safe." Sophie's laugh was bitter. "Safe with you? Your family's the reason I'm in this mess. I can handle myself, Nathan." "I know you can," he said, his voice earnest. "But Vanessa's not playing games. She threatened to expose family secrets that could hurt more than just me. I need you and Liam out of her reach until I deal with her." Sophie hesitated, torn between her instinct to run and the reality of Vanessa's threat. She thought of Liam, his bright eyes and endless questions, and the life she'd fought to build. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I'm not promising anything." Nathan nodded, respecting her boundaries. He arranged for a security team, discreet trusted, to watch Sophie's apartment and Liam's daycare just in case. He returned to Miami, his mind racing. Vanessa's threat about family secrets was a ticking bomb, and he needed to disarm it before it detonated. He met with his investigator again, digging deeper into the Blake Empire's financial records. What he found chilled him. Hidden accounts, questionable transactions, and Vanessa's name tied to them all. She wasn't just protecting her position, but guarding a fortune built on shaky ground. Sophie, back in Orlando, wrestled with Nathan's offer. She checked on Liam sleeping soundly in his small bed, his stuffed dinosaur clutched tight. The thought of uprooting him, of trusting Nathan, was terrifying, but Vanessa's reach was real. She called Maya, her friend and fellow nurse, and shared just enough to get advice. "If this guy's for real," Maya said, "maybe he's your best shot at keeping Liam safe. But don't let him call the shots, Soph. You're the one in charge." The next day, Sophie agreed to Nathan's plan, but on her terms. She and Liam would stay at a safe house outside Orlando, arranged by Nathan's team, but she'd keep her job and independence. Nathan arrived to help them move, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Liam, curious and unafraid, asked, "Are you Mommy's friend?" Nathan's smile was tight, his heart aching with the truth he couldn't yet share. "Yeah, buddy." He said something like that. As they settled into the safe house, Nathan prepared for war. Vanessa was the enemy, and he'd fight to protect the family he'd only just discovered. But the battle was beginning, and the secrets she held were a shadow looming over them all. The safe house was a quiet retreat on the outskirts of Orlando, a modest ranch-style home nestled among oak trees, its windows shuttered against prying eyes. Sophie Tran stood in the small kitchen, unpacking groceries, while Liam played with blocks in the living room, his laughter a fragile anchor in her storm of emotions. The move had been necessary, a shield against Vanessa's threats, but it felt like a surrender. Sophie's independence, hard-won through years of struggle, was slipping, and Nathan's presence in her life was both a lifeline and a chain. She wanted to trust him to believe he could protect them, but the fear of losing Liam to the Blake world kept her guard up. Nathan, back in Miami, was a man at war with himself. He stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the ocean a restless mirror of his thoughts. The revelation of Liam had awakened something in him, a fierce need to be a father to make up for lost time. But his own inadequacy haunted him. His childhood had been a cold parade of nannies and expectations, and his parents were more concerned with the Blake Empire than him. How could he be a father when he'd never known one? The thought of failing Liam, of failing Sophie, gnawed at him, a wound deeper than Vanessa's betrayal. Sophie's own fears mirrored his. She watched Liam build a tower of blocks at the safe house, his small hands precise and determined. He was her world, so she'd endured night shifts and sleepless nights studying to become a lead nurse. But Nathan's wealth, his family's power loomed like a storm cloud. What if he wanted custody? What if the Blakes saw Liam as an heir, a pawn to mold in their image? She'd left Miami to escape that world, and now it was back wearing Nathan's face. Their night on the yacht, once a cherished memory, felt like a trap that had bound her to a man she couldn't fully trust. Nathan's days were consumed with dismantling Vanessa's lies. His investigator had uncovered more shell companies linked to her funds siphoned from Blake accounts and a network of allies within the family's inner circle. She wasn't just protecting her position, she was building her own empire that could survive the Blakes' collapse. Nathan knew he had to act, but exposing her risked unraveling the family's legacy. His mother, Evelyn, would never forgive a scandal, and Edward, his brother, was too weak to stand against Vanessa. The weight of it all pressed on Nathan, his resolve tested by the fear of losing everything. In Orlando, Sophie struggled to maintain normalcy for Liam. She kept her hospital shifts driving into the city under the watchful eyes of Nathan's security team. The rumors about her had quieted, but the damage lingered, her colleagues' sidelong glances, a reminder of Vanessa's reach. At night, she'd sit with Liam reading stories, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Mommy, why are we here?" Liam asked one evening, his eyes wide with curiosity. "It's like an adventure," Sophie said, forcing a smile. "We're just staying somewhere new for a bit." Liam nodded, satisfied, but Sophie's heart ached. She wanted to tell him about Nathan to prepare him for the truth, but the words wouldn't come. Trust was a fragile thread, and Nathan hadn't earned it yet. She called Maya, her voice low to avoid waking Liam. She admitted, "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. He wants to be in Liam's life, but what if he takes him away?" Maya's voice was firm. "You're his mother, Soph. No one can take that from you. But if this guy's serious, he deserves a chance to prove it. Just don't let him run the show." Nathan, meanwhile, was grappling with his own doubts. He'd arranged the safe house and funded the security, but it felt like a bandage on a wound that needed surgery. He wanted to be more than a protector. He wanted to be a father, a partner. But Sophie's walls were high, and he couldn't blame her. Vanessa's lies had poisoned their past, and his failure to question them had let her run. He visited Orlando, keeping his distance, but checking in with the security team. One evening, he drove to the safe house, parking across the street, watching the warm light spill from the windows. He imagined Liam inside, a boy he'd never met, but already loved, and the ache in his chest grew. Their next meeting was at a park near the safe house, a neutral space Sophie had chosen. Liam played on the swings, his laughter carried on the breeze, while Sophie and Nathan sat on a bench, the space between them charged with unspoken fears. "I'm trying, Sophie," Nathan said, his voice low. "I know I messed up believing Vanessa, and I'm not looking for you harder. But I want to be here for Liam, for you." Sophie's eyes stayed on Liam, her hands clasped tightly. "Wanting isn't enough," she said. "I've been his everything. I can't just hand him over to a world I don't trust. Your family, they destroy people like me." "I'm not them," Nathan said, his voice fierce. "I'll protect you both. But you have to let me in just a little." She looked at him then, her eyes searching his. The love they'd felt on the yacht was still there, a faint ember beneath years of pain, but trust was a bridge neither knew how to cross. "I'll try," she said finally. "But it's on my terms, Nathan. Liam comes first." He nodded, a flicker of hope in his chest. But the moment was fleeting. Back in Miami, Vanessa was moving her own plans, accelerating. She'd sensed Nathan's investigation, felt the noose tightening. In a late-night call to an unknown contact, she hissed, "He's getting too close. We need to move faster." The Blake Empire's secrets were her leverage, but Nathan's determination and his growing bond with Sophie and Liam was a threat she couldn't ignore. The inner conflict raged on as Sophie and Nathan navigated their fragile truce. Nathan fought to be the man Liam needed to overcome the ghosts of his childhood. Sophie battled to protect her son, to hold on to the life she'd built. The love between them was a flame flickering, but alive. But the shadow of Vanessa's schemes loomed threatening to consume them all. The Blake estate loomed over Miami's coastline, its white columns and sprawling gardens, a testament to a legacy built on ambition and secrets. Inside the grand dining room was a battleground, its crystal chandelier casting fractured light over the mahogany table. Nathan Blake stood at the head, his posture rigid, a folder of damning evidence clutched in his hand. The family was gathered. His mother Evelyn, her gaze sharp as ever. His brother Edward slouched and disinterested. And Vanessa, her smile a mask of composure that barely hid her unease. Tonight Nathan would expose her no matter the cost. He'd spent weeks building his case, his investigator unearthing a trail of Vanessa's deceit-forged documents that had slandered Sophie's shell companies, siphoning Blake's funds, and emails tying her to a network of insiders profiting from the family's empire. The revelation of Nathan's son Liam had fueled his resolve, but Vanessa's threat to expose the family's darker financial dealings hung over him like a guillotine. He knew this confrontation could fracture the Blake legacy, but protecting Sophie and Liam was worth the risk. "Enough games," Nathan said, his voice cutting through the room's tension. He tossed the folder onto the table papers, spilling out bank statements, email chains, and the forged hospital report that had branded Sophie a thief. "Vanessa, you've been lying for years. You drove Sophie away, spread rumors to ruin her, and now you're threatening her again. It ends tonight." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, scanning the documents. Edward shifted uncomfortably, his wine glass forgotten. Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her fingers tightened around her napkin. "Nathan, you're delusional," she said, her voice smooth but edged. "You're chasing ghosts, accusing me of covering your own mistakes. That woman and her child are nothing but trouble." "Don't." Nathan snapped, his anger flaring. "You fabricated lies to keep me from my son. You've been stealing from this family, Vanessa, and I have proof. Step down, or I'll take this to the board." The room went still. Evelyn's voice was cold as she spoke. "Nathan, these are serious accusations. Do you understand what this could do to us?" "I understand what she's done," Nathan said, his gaze locked on Vanessa. "She's betrayed us all. Sophie and Liam are my family, and I won't let her destroy them." Vanessa's composure cracked, her eyes flashing with fury. "You think you can take me down?" she hissed. "You have no idea what's at stake. The Blake Empire isn't clean, Nathan. I know where the bodies are buried financially and otherwise. If I fall, I'm taking you all with me." The threat landed like a bomb, Evelyn's face paling. Edward muttered something incoherent, but Nathan didn't flinch. "Then we'll deal with it," he said. "But you're done, Vanessa. Resign, or I'll ensure the authorities see every shred of evidence." Vanessa stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and venomous. She stormed out, leaving the family in stunned silence. Evelyn turned to Nathan, her expression unreadable. "You'd better be sure about this." "Nathan," she said, "you're playing with fire." He nodded, the weight of his decision settling in. "I'm sure." In Orlando, Sophie Tran sat in the safe house, the air conditioner's hum a faint comfort against her racing thoughts. Liam was asleep, his stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. The move to the safe house had been necessary, but it felt like a cage. Sophie's shifts at Mercy General were her only tether to normalcy. But even there, Vanessa's rumors lingered, casting doubt on her reputation. Nathan's security team patrolled discreetly, but Sophie felt their presence like a leash, a reminder of the Blake world she'd fled. That morning, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever. Stay away from Nathan, or you'll lose everything." The words were Vanessa's, unmistakable in their malice. Sophie's hands shook as she deleted the message, her fear spiking. She'd agreed to Nathan's protection, but trust was still a fragile thread stretched thin by years of betrayal. She wanted to believe he was different, that the man she'd met on the yacht was still there, but the Blake name was a shadow she couldn't escape. She called Nathan, her voice tight. "Vanessa's threatening me again," she said, relaying the message. "She's not stopping, Nathan. What's happening?" Nathan, still reeling from the family meeting, gripped his phone. "I confronted her," he said. "She's cornered Sophie and she's lashing out. My team's tracking her, but I need you to stay put. I'm coming to Orlando." Sophie hesitated, her instinct to push him away, warring with her need for safety. "Fine," she said. "But this doesn't mean I trust you. Liam's my priority." "I know," Nathan said, his voice softening. "I'm fighting for him too." He arrived at the safe house that evening, his presence filling the small space with a mix of tension and reassurance. Liam was at the kitchen table, coloring, his curiosity piqued by the stranger. "Are you Mommy's friend?" he asked, his eyes wide. Nathan's heart clenched, the sight of his son, a jolt to his system. "Yeah, buddy," he said, crouching to Liam's level. "I'm a friend." Sophie watched, her emotions a tangle of hope and fear. She wanted Liam to know his father, but the risks were too high. Nathan's security team intercepted another threat that night, an email to Sophie's hospital accusing her of fraud. Nathan's investigator traced it to Vanessa's network, but the speed of her retaliation was alarming. He bolstered the security around the safe house, installing cameras and increasing patrols. Sophie, though grateful, felt trapped, her independence slipping further. "How long do we have to live like this?" she asked Nathan, her voice sharp. "Until she stopped," he said. "I'm close, Sophie. I've got enough to bring her down, but I must be careful. She's got leveraged secrets about my family that could hurt us all." Sophie's eyes searched his, looking for the man she'd trusted on the yacht. "Then hurry," she said, "because I'm not sure how much more of this I can take." The confrontation with Vanessa set the stage for a war threatening to consume them all. Nathan returned to Miami, his resolve hardened, but his heart heavy with the weight of protecting a family he was only beginning to know. In the safe house, Sophie held Liam close, her determination to keep him safe clashing with the pull of a bond she couldn't entirely deny. Vanessa's next move was coming, and it would test them all. The safe house in Orlando was a quiet cocoon, its walls shielding Sophie Tran and her son Liam from the storm brewing in Miami. Sophie stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic thud of the knife was a small anchor in her turbulent world. Liam played nearby, his laughter a fleeting balm for her frayed nerves. The threats from Vanessa had intensified, anonymous messages, rumors at the hospital, a constant pressure that made Sophie feel like prey. Nathan's security team was a comfort, but it also reminded her of the Blake world she'd fled, a world that now held her son's future in its grip. Nathan Blake in Miami was a man on a mission. The confrontation with Vanessa had exposed her schemes, but her threat to reveal the Blake family's financial secrets was a ticking clock. He worked late into the night, his penthouse office littered with documents and coffee cups. His investigator had uncovered more. Vanessa's shell companies were tied to offshore accounts, siphoning millions from the Blake empire. The evidence was enough to destroy her, but Nathan knew she wouldn't go quietly. He needed to protect Sophie and Liam before Vanessa's next strike. He drove to Orlando, his heart heavy with the weight of his failures. He'd believed Vanessa's lies 5 years ago, letting Sophie slip away, and now his son had grown up without him. The guilt was constant, but so was his determination to make things right. At the safe house, he knocked softly, and Sophie let him in, her expression wary but softer than before. Liam was napping, giving them a rare moment to talk. "I'm sorry," Nathan said, his voice raw, "for believing Vanessa, for not fighting harder to find you. I should have known better, Sophie. I should have trusted what we had." Sophie's eyes met his, the pain of 5 years reflected in their depths. "I was scared," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Your family, their power. It felt like a machine that would crush us. I left to protect Liam, but didn't want to hurt you. I just didn't know how to stay." The confession broke something open between them, a crack in the wall they'd both built. Nathan reached for her hand, pausing when she stiffened, then gently took it when she didn't pull away. He said, "I want to be his father, not just in name, but in every way that matters. I don't know how to do it, Sophie, but I want to learn. For him, for you." Sophie's throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. She thought of the years alone, the nights spent studying while Liam slept, the fear that had driven her from Miami. Nathan's sincerity was a bridge to that night on the yacht, when they'd been two people unburdened by the world. "It's not just about you," she said. "Liam's my everything. If we do this, it's slow and on my terms." Nathan nodded, his relief palpable. "Whatever you need, I'm here." They spent the evening together, a tentative step toward reconciliation. Nathan played with Liam when he woke, building a block tower, while Sophie watched, her heart tangled with hope and caution. Like Nathan's, Liam's laughter was a reminder of what they could be, a family, if they could rebuild trust. But Vanessa's shadow loomed. She'd gone quiet since the confrontation, a silence that unnerved Nathan. He bolstered security around the safe house, his team monitoring her every move. Sophie shared more about her life, the years of struggle and small triumphs, and Nathan listened, his admiration for her strength growing. They were finding a fragile harmony rhythm when Vanessa struck again. A late-night call from Nathan's investigator confirmed his fears. Vanessa had sent another threat, this time to Sophie's phone, a photo of Liam at daycare with the caption, "You can't protect him forever." Sophie's hands shook as she showed Nathan, her fear giving way to fury. "She's not stopping," she said. "What do we do?" Nathan's jaw clenched, his resolve hardening. "We end this," he said. He coordinated with his security team, setting a trap. They traced Vanessa's communications, pinpointing her location to a Miami condo, where she met with a contact, a lawyer tied to her shell companies. Nathan alerted the authorities, providing his evidence, and the police moved in, arresting Vanessa for fraud and extortion. The arrest was a victory, but it came at a cost. Vanessa's threats had shaken Sophie, and though she was safe, the fear lingered. That night in the safe house, Sophie and Nathan sat on the couch, Liam asleep upstairs. "I could keep him safe alone," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't do this without you." Nathan took her hand, his touch steady. "You don't have to. I'm here, Sophie, for both of you." The reconciliation was a beginning, not an end. Trust was still a work in progress, but the love they'd felt on the yacht was alive, a flame they were learning to nurture. The immediate threat was gone with Vanessa's arrest, but the Blake family's secrets still loomed, and Nathan knew the fight wasn't over. For now, though, he and Sophie were together, building a future for Liam, one careful step at a time. The safe house in Orlando was a quiet fortress, its oak-shaded walls a temporary shield for Sophie Tran and her son Liam. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, but Sophie's hands trembled as she poured a cup, her eyes darting to her phone. Vanessa's arrest had brought a fleeting relief, but the threat she'd posed lingered like a storm cloud. Sophie's life at Mercy General Hospital was still under scrutiny, and the rumors Vanessa had spread clung to her reputation. Liam played in the living room, his laughter a fragile anchor, unaware of the chaos that had nearly upended their world. Sophie's heart ached for normalcy, but the Blake family's shadow was long, and she feared its reach. In Miami, Nathan Blake stood in his office at the Blake Hotel headquarters, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop to his turmoil. Vanessa's arrest was a victory, and her schemes were exposed through the investigators' evidence. Shell companies siphoned funds and a network of lies targeting Sophie and Liam. But Nathan knew Vanessa too well. She was a viper, and even in custody, her venom could still strike. His security team had intercepted her final threat, a photo of Liam at daycare, and the memory fueled his resolve. He'd protect his son and Sophie no matter the cost, but the price was rising. The crisis erupted late that night. Nathan's phone buzzed with an urgent call from his investigator. Vanessa hired a hacker before her arrest, the man said, his voice tense. They've breached the Blake Hotel system. Guest data, financials, everything. They're threatening to leak it unless you pay. And they mentioned Sophie and Liam specifically. Nathan's blood ran cold. He'd underestimated Vanessa's reach, her ability to strike from behind bars. The hacker's demands were a ransom for the Blake empire and for the safety of Sophie and Liam. He called his security team, ordering a lockdown of the safe house and increased protection for Sophie. Then he contacted the authorities, sharing the hacker's threat and Vanessa's connection. The police were already building a case against her, but this new front required immediate action. In Orlando, Sophie sensed the shift. Nathan arrived at the safe house at dawn, his face etched with worry. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice low to avoid waking Liam. He explained the hack, the stolen data, and the threat to her and Liam. Sophie's hands clenched, her fear giving way to anger. "She's in jail," she said, her voice shaking. "How is she still doing this?" "She planned," Nathan said. "But I'm handling it. The police are tracking the hacker, and my team is securing the hotel system. Please stay here, Sophie. Keep Liam close." Sophie's eyes flashed. "I'm tired of hiding, Nathan. This is my life, my son. I can't keep running." "I know," he said, his voice softening. "But I'm not losing you again. I'll fix this, I promise." The day was a blur of action. Nathan coordinated with the police, who traced the hacker to a Miami apartment. The suspect, a young tech expert with ties to Vanessa's network, was arrested, but not before leaking a portion of the hotel's data online. The breach hit the news, tarnishing the Blake name and sending the board into a frenzy. Evelyn, Nathan's mother, called an emergency meeting, her voice icy over the phone. "You've brought this on us, Nathan," she said. "Handle it, or you're out." Nathan ignored the ultimatum, focusing on Sophie and Liam. He returned to the safe house where Sophie was packing, her resolve hardening. "I'm going back to my apartment," she said. "I can't live like this, Nathan. Liam deserves a home, not a bunker." He grabbed her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "It's not safe yet. The hackers are in custody, but Vanessa's people are still out there. Give me one more day, Sophie, please." She hesitated, her eyes searching his. The man she'd met on the yacht was still there beneath the weight of his family's empire, and she saw his desperation to protect them. "One day," she said, "then I'm done hiding." Nathan worked through the night, and his team rebuilt the hotel's security systems, while the police interrogated the hacker. The suspect confessed, implicating Vanessa in a broader scheme to destabilize the Blake empire for her own gain. The evidence was enough to extend her charges, ensuring she'd stay behind bars. The leaked data sparked lawsuits, but the damage was done, and the Blake name was under siege. Sophie, meanwhile, clung to routine. She took Liam to the park, the security team discreetly nearby, and watched him play, his joy a reminder of what she was fighting for. Nathan joined them, his presence a quiet reassurance. "It's almost over," he said, sitting beside her. The police have what they need. Vanessa's done. Sophie nodded, but her heart was heavy. And then what she asked. Your family, your world, it's still there. How do I know Liam will be safe? Nathan's eyes met hers, steady and sure. Because I'll make it safe. I'm not my family, Sophie. I'm choosing you and Liam. The crisis peaked when a final message arrived, routed through an encrypted server. You can't stop us. Nathan's team traced it to a remnant of Vanessa's network, a last-ditch attempt to intimidate. The police moved swiftly, dismantling the group, and the threat dissolved. The Blake empire was battered, but Nathan's focus was clear. Sophie and Liam were his priority, not the legacy he'd been groomed to uphold. As the dust settled, Sophie and Nathan stood together in the safe house, Liam asleep in his room. The climax had tested them, but it had also forged a bond stronger than the chaos. We're not done, Sophie said, her voice firm. But we're closer. Nathan nodded, his hand brushing hers. We'll get there, he said. Together. The Miami skyline sparkled under a twilight sky, its lights dancing on the waters of Biscayne Bay, just as they had 5 years ago. The yacht Elysium cut through the gentle waves, its decks alive with the hum of celebration. But this time, the occasion was personal. Nathan Blake stood at the railing, his tailored suit replaced by a simple white shirt, his eyes fixed on Sophie Tran, as she laughed with Liam, their son, near the bow. The yacht, once the stage for their fateful meeting, now hosted Liam's 5th birthday, a moment of joy that felt like a hard-won victory. A year had passed since Vanessa's schemes had nearly torn them apart. Her arrest and dismantling of her network had shaken the Blake empire. But Nathan had weathered the storm. He'd stepped back from the family's day-to-day operations, delegating to trusted executives while focusing on what mattered, building a life with Sophie and Liam. The leaked data had sparked lawsuits, but Nathan's transparency with the board and the public had mitigated the damage, earning him a grudging respect from his mother, Evelyn, who was forced to acknowledge his strength. Sophie, too, had found her footing. She'd returned to her Orlando apartment, her job at Mercy General secure, after the truth about Vanessa's rumors came to light. Her colleagues had rallied around her, and she'd earned her lead nurse certification, a testament to her resilience. Liam was thriving, his curiosity and laughter filling their small home. Sophie had slowly let Nathan into their lives on her terms, and the trust they'd rebuilt was a fragile but growing thing. Tonight on the yacht, the air was warm with promise. The deck was decorated with balloons and streamers, with Liam's favorite dinosaur theme everywhere. Guests, Sophie's friends from the hospital, Nathan's trusted allies, and a few carefully chosen family members mingled their chatter, mingling with the soft jazz from the speakers. Liam darted between them, a plastic dinosaur in hand, his eyes excitedly bright. Sophie watched him, her heart full, but her gaze drifted to Nathan. On a quiet evening in their apartment, he'd proposed a month ago, and the ring on her finger felt both foreign and right. Nathan joined her at the bow, his hand finding hers. He's happy, he said, nodding toward Liam, who was showing a cousin his dinosaur. You've done an incredible job, Sophie. She smiled, her fingers tightening around his. We've done it, she said. It hasn't been easy, but we're here. The past year had been a journey of reconciliation. Nathan had spent time with Liam, learning to be a father, reading bedtime stories, playing catch, answering endless questions about the world. Sophie had watched her fears easing with each moment of Nathan's patience and love. They'd faced challenges together, navigating the Blake family's expectations, rebuilding Sophie's reputation, and healing the wounds of 5 years apart. The love they'd felt on the yacht had been tested, but it had endured stronger for the trials. As the party continued, Nathan took Sophie's hand and led her to a quiet corner of the deck where they'd first connected 5 years ago. The stars were bright, and the ocean was a dark mirror below. "I've been thinking about that night," he said, his voice low, "how it changed everything. I didn't know then what I know now, that you and Liam are my home." Sophie's eyes shimmered, the weight of his words settling in her chest. "I was scared then," she said, "afraid of you, of your world. But you've shown me who you are, Nathan. You're not your family. You're ours." He pulled her close, their foreheads touching the world, narrowing to just them. "I want this forever," he said. "You, me, Liam. A family." She nodded, her voice a whisper. "We already are." The party peaked as Liam blew out his candles, the crowd cheering. Nathan and Sophie stood together, their hands entwined, watching their sun beam. The yacht sailed on, symbolizing the journey that had brought them here, from a night of passion to a bond forged through struggle and love. The Blake Empire would always be there, with its secrets and shadows, but Nathan and Sophie had chosen their own path, one built on trust and the promise of forever. As the night ended, Nathan knelt beside Liam, handing him a small toy boat. "For your adventures," he said, ruffling his hair. Liam grinned, hugging him, and Sophie's heart swelled. The cord that had bound them, once a fleeting spark on this very yacht, was now a family eternal and unbreakable.